David, you're going to stay with me here. Fantastic.
Yep.
So next up we have David, who is the CEO of Adalo, another legend of no code that everyone knows. David, with your passion for understanding of design, you left the architecture field to join a tech startup in St. Louis, where you expanded your design skills to include everything from UX to product and marketing, and branding, of course. David, you're going to cover the past, the present, and the future of no code, and how will our future be different when we move from a world where only 0.3% of people can create software to a world when 10% of people can. What about 50%? What do you got for us, David?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Let me see. Let me share my screen here. All right. Can you, hopefully we can see this here. All right, awesome. Well, thank you for all sticking around, joining or joining for the first time if you're coming from a different stage. So actually had an amazing opportunity to put together kind of like a little mini book series, if you will. I got a chance to interview 10 of the top experts in the no code space, along with, we actually sent out a huge bunch of questions. I guess I should back up. My name's David, and this nice little intro from from the stage there. But anyway, so I put together this whole report about kind of what the future of no code is, from over 1,400 responses from the community, as well as talking with a ton of different experts in the space. So a part of this talk will be about this. Part of this will be a new content as well. But a lot of the insights that I've drawn from my time at no code has really been about that. So first, a little bit backing up. I always like to start off with like, what exactly is no code, so we can have a good conversation about it. So the definition that I kind of came up with after talking with all the experts was that it's a unique solution to a problem that could have been written with code, but the individuals have chosen to use visual methods instead. So there's three things to highlight with this. The first is that it's a solution to a problem. And that's vague on purpose, in the sense of like, it can take different forms of what that solution is, whether that's an automation solution or whether that is a website or an app or voice, whatever it is. The next is that, again, whatever that solution could have been done with coding. And then the last one I think is the most important, is that it's unique. So, we've had SaaS products for a while that are solutions to digital problems, but now we have it in the way that we can make them unique. So I just kind of want to first set the stage of like, that's kind of what I consider no code. And I think when we back up and go into the history, that'll make a lot more sense. So I'm going to back up now and go to our past. When I was pulling up this GIF, I was like, oh man, I want to download the Snake game. Anyways, so I think in order to start out with where no code kind of originated was all the way back in 1979. I think the original concept of no code was born with VisiCalc. I didn't actually realize this until I kind of really got into no code and especially started building Adalo. Like, all apps are actually just spreadsheets, like, at the end of the day. I think now that's become a little more of a mainstream concept with no code, but that was pretty mind-blowing to me when I realized that's actually really what was happening. VisiCalc was the first digital spreadsheet where you could set up anything, whether that was doing your rent and your income and all those types of things on it. So I think it was originally born here. Computers really weren't quite ready for no code throughout like the kind of 80s. It wasn't really until 1991 with Microsoft's Visual Basic that in dev, it shifted from being just text to also having visual elements where you could drag in different blocks of code. So this really ushers in the low code era that I kind of see here happening, where 1995 and 1997 we start moving to the actual like web side of things, instead of Visual Basic was more on the apps and on the Windows side of things. So now we're actually making very, very basic websites with it, although still low code in the sense of you're doing a lot more coding and you definitely have to know how to code. And then to today, you've kind of seen that transition with some of those larger low code platforms, QuickBase, Mendex, Appian. There's a bunch more too as well. But I think we started shifting from those last two, which were a little more about websites, to now actually about apps as well. I I think the other trend that was happening that kind of formed this no code was the prototyping era. So it actually started back in the 1987 with tools that actually weren't originally designed for prototyping, but kind of started to be used by them. It wasn't really until 1997, 2003, we start seeing actual tools that were designed for prototyping and you're dragging and dropping. And then the days of Balsamiq, I don't know if you were doing UX during those days. I had a love-hate relationship with Balsamiq, but it's you just wanted to make it look better and better, and it was really, in today's standards, we just call it wireframe, but it was very crude looking. You couldn't get high fidelity to today, where now you can make things look absolutely amazing. And like me personally, this is kind of the side that I got into with no code, where I was putting together mockups that started to look more and more realistic, and it was just like, well, why can't I just make this thing real? So you had low code, which is getting more and more powerful, and you have prototyping, and this is getting easier and easier to design. And really, those two forces kind of started to slide together as they're evolving at the same time. And I think that's actually really where no code starts to emerge. And I will say, I think there is an era that I'm calling the no code before no code era, where it really is no code. We just weren't really calling it that at that point. I think really it first kind of started with Blogger there. And then we start to see Squarespace and WordPress start to come around, where you can make very basic either blogs or very basic, now you can make more complicated websites on them. But at the time, kind of a bit more basic websites, but you really were able to create something from scratch and solve some sort of digital problem that you had. And it was unique. I think that was the key thing here as well. We're starting to see things where I can actually customize it to what I want. And then it starts shifting from not just websites to actually e-commerce being added onto the mix as well. So I think that was kind of the era before we actually called it no code. After talking with a bunch of the experts, one of the questions I asked was like, well, where did this term come from, right? Who started calling it that? And most of them kind of agreed sometime in around 2015, 2016, when the rise of low code and some of those companies I was mentioning before were starting to IPO and get popular and those types of things, it probably was starting to get mentioned. I think it really wasn't until 2019 when Product Hunt you started to see actual terminology around no code start to spin up. It has a little bit of steam there. Really, I think, though, got officially cemented. Pretty much everybody, all the experts agreed that was actually when things got officially cemented as like no code as the term. And it really was then like right after that things exploded from all those, like I said, this part of this data is a bunch of the, responses we sent out to the community. And, you can really start seeing that like, when people start to get into no code is starting to explode and take off. Obviously, we know now, everyone here, I feel like, really believes that as well. So now let's kind of move on to the present, right? Like what does no code look like today? So obviously there are tons of no code tools in a bunch of different categories, and I'll clarify that these are not even remotely all of the tools. I think these are just mainly the ones that were here at this conference or maybe mentioned. Apologies if I forgot anybody that's at this conference that's on here. But you have automation, you have app builders, you have integration tools, you have more spreadsheet, database storage type of stuff. You have your website builders, you have your AI, you have voice, you have games. We're starting to really expand a lot more past just websites. And I think there are 3 reasons why no code has really taken this big, huge spike. The first is supply and demand, right? At the time, and there still isn't, there's not enough developers for the amount of software that's getting requested today. And I think that's partially because now we have a complete generation of people that have only grown up, knowing software. I know the whole software is going to eat the world thing, right? And it is very true. So I think we do not have enough people. Like I was, the intro, like only 0.3% of people today even know how to code. So there's this really kind of supply and demand thing that's pulling us. I think another thing really why no code has exploded is because of you all here today. People believe that it's possible. I think maybe in that era of no code before no code, people were more skeptical of it, and people are definitely still skeptical of it. Believe me, I hear tons of comments of that what we're trying to do is not possible. But I think we're really actually starting to form a community where everyone's helping each other out, and I think that is really key. And I think then the other reason is I think we've reached an inflection point of what's possible with no code, and there's a few reasons why I kind of tucked underneath that one. But like we moved from just more like templated website stuff to now actually being able to do tons of different things like I had on that slide a few seconds ago with the landscape. And I think that's because of a few things. One, integrations. We're actually all starting to work together. Another key thing is design systems. So in the UX design world, up until like, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was still kind of the wild, wild west where there weren't really standard conventions, or you'd say building blocks today. I think now having more building block, everyone before that, it was like, I grab a rectangle and a piece of text. I grab a rectangle and a piece of text. I grab a rectangle and a piece of text. Now we're starting to see design systems that are, hey, this is how this app bar works, or here's how this thing works. And we're starting to see that happening. I think cloud infrastructure evolving made a lot of this possible. And I think then the fact that we move beyond just more kind of templated websites because all those other reasons now has led to an increased array of possibilities that you can just build. And now things have really kind of exploded because of that. So what can you do today with no code? I'm sure you heard a ton about this at this conference so far. There's a bunch of these apps were built on Adalo, so near and dear to me, but you can launch a startup. This was an app that was acquired on Adalo. They created a way in a kind of a post-COVID world where you can actually have interviews with people and things like that. And you could book meetings, and it was kind of like a digital career fair, if you will. There's another startup called GigUp. It's a way for fans and music artists to connect and interact live, which has been amazing to see. Spirited Minds is an app for children and teens to create positive mental health practices together. So there's kind of an array of things that you can kind of go into with your startup, whether that's more kind of community-based or personal-based and those sorts of things, has been really kind of amazing. I know you all probably know a ton about the possibilities with startups in the no-code space. Another thing, though, is that you can add supplementary apps onto your existing businesses, and that could be something that's an externally facing thing. So this is, it's a karate in Denver. They actually a crazy story is that they were trying to make an app with the developer ahead of time. And the students in the karate were very excited about it, but it unfortunately didn't quite work the way they needed it to work. And then COVID happened, and then, they didn't have a way to practice. And this business owner just found it and found no code and started making it. And it's really awesome to see that it's like now how they run their kind of whole business on there. So really adding supplemental things to it. This is another really amazing app on our platform where they send all of their workouts through it. He's a super high end. He has a ton of actually golf and tennis pros are his clients, and now he does again all of it through it. So it's been crazy to see. And I think as a supplementary apps, it kind of goes back to that first comment I made about really it's just like a spreadsheet at the end of the day. So what are you doing in spreadsheets and docs every day? And I think those are really great opportunities to add supplemental apps to your businesses. There's another one called RushCap. It's a college advisory app for youth soccer players looking to play college soccer. There's tons of crazy stuff about college soccer and youth soccer and all those types of things. So it's a great way for all of them to connect together. Another thing that you can do, instead of adding it on to a business, is you can also just build a community on it. This is a crowdsourcing counseling resources app that everyone can collaborate together on, which is awesome. This Fruitful is a crazy one where this dad and daughter wanted to have a way to everyone. They're like, everyone has their backyards and they could plant stuff and have gardens, but then what do they do with them? They try to give them away to their kids, and their kids don't want all the millions of apples that they might get. So this is a way to actually just build a community around sharing those things. And it was really amazing to see, like, kind of a dad and daughter combo, like make an app on Adalo. And then now, not just like community apps, but you can also just make personal apps, whether that's, this acts of kindness, which is like a fundraiser for a school, or Mooneyfest, which is a way for you to kind of harness the power of the moon and those sorts of things. So there's an incredible array of opportunities and things that you can possibly do in today's no code world. But I know the big question is like, okay, so what is the future going to look like, right? Like, we're already in this world where all those things I just showed you weren't quite possible easily, right? As easily accessible, unless you either had the dev skills or the money to pay for them. So what is this going to mean as we ratchet this up, right? So as we go from a world where only 0.3% of people can code or can create software, right? Now, what does it look like when 5% can, or 10% can, or 50% can? And like, that's pretty like hard to really fathom right now, because we're talking about right now, literally only 0.3% of people can. If you add in, I think, all of the no coders, maybe we already are up to 4%. I don't know, 2%. I don't know, right? I guess I'd have to check how many no coders there are, but that would be an interesting stat to like add on to this, like people that can code, right? But we aren't even, my point is, we aren't really even scratching the total surface yet of what's possible with software and no code, because I still think we're kind of really down in our infancy of what's possible right now. And this is one of the questions, or all these questions, like all these answers from these questions in this next segment. I got experts talking to, whether that was Vlad at Webflow, Wade Foster at Zapier, Ben Tossel at MakerPad, Tara Reid, tons of just amazing people from all the different kinds of walks of the no-code space. So for startups and businesses, obviously, I think the biggest thing is, you can have faster validation of ideas at a much lower cost. But I think that also means that you can solve different types of problems, right? Just like that chart before, where we're letting it be more accessible to everybody. That means we're going to have different types of problems that get solved, right? Instead of just problems that are maybe mainly more like focus on what developers and designers and tech-minded people know about, right? There are going to be other problems that we as a community don't really know about, and that's going to be amazing. And I think another thing is a potential to create hyper niche solutions. Again, in the past, it wouldn't have been affordable for you to, unless again, you were a developer, but even that, like, all the support costs that you'd have to have with the database, all that kind of stuff, to have some of these really smaller niche things run. And if you can just find 10 people that are, or even maybe you're willing to, just because you're so passionate about it, afford to pay those smaller monthly fees for database hosting and those types of things. Like, now it's actually possible to make really, really small hyper niche solutions. And I think we might actually even see a place where actually, let me back up for a second. So, like, I think in a lot of huge SaaS companies right now, they have massive backlogs, or I guess I shouldn't say I know they have massive backlogs of what they need to do. And sometimes a lot of that gets driven by, whoever the biggest enterprises are that maybe are controlling those things, or have the most influence, if you will. But then what happens then is you start adding those features and maybe they don't quite work out. I think what I mean by hyper niche solutions is that it's going to be possible for actually us to make like copies of like apps, so that like you only get this app with like these 10 features and you get it with these ones. Like, I think that type of a world will be possible now with this. And then obviously a lot more internal apps and testing of new ideas at those larger scale businesses. Amazing quote from Vlad from this. He fundamentally believes only 10% of all SaaS services have been created so far. So if you're out there looking to build a SaaS service, you are in luck. There's still 90% of ideas that are out there. So what does this mean for designers and developers? I think, some people maybe outside of the no code space were like, oh, and even some people that aren't quite in it yet, think that it's going to like take their jobs, and they get upset, and they think it's, oh, they're just trying to steal this stuff. We get, even Adalo gets sometimes those hateful comments on Facebook and stuff like that, those areas. But that's not going to happen, right? I think what actually is going to do the opposite, allow the developers to focus on the hardest problems to solve, right? As we start moving up and technology starts getting more advanced, AI, VR, AR, all those kinds of things that are much more complicated problems, they're going to have to start tackling. So developers are not going anyway by any stretch. It'll just get more specialized and kind of keep moving upstream. And I think on the designer side of things, I think that they have the most to gain from the no code movement. Now they have the ability to not be stuck. Before you had a product idea and you could make it and then you were stuck. So I think now that has been unlocked. You definitely have a superpower to some extent. I would argue maybe it's easier to pick up no code tools to unlock designers to create what they want, as opposed to teaching design to developers to have what they want to be created maybe unlocked, if you're following that kind of a path. And then finally, product managers are really going to have to start to evolve their processes a bunch. The future of no code is empowering developers and designers to focus on the things that they are good at. That's Brian from DraftBit. Okay, so next is what is going to happen with dev shops and freelancers? Well, one, there's a massive, massive opportunity to jump in and begin today with that stuff. I think we're seeing a shift from just websites to now tons more things, whether that's automation, whether that's voice, or whether that the possibility with app development, obviously with all the amazing tools that are out there, I think is huge. I do think that dev shops that have bad practices that maybe are preying and charging exorbitant amounts of money for things that maybe aren't that great quality, I think they might have problems. I think the ones that are willing to embrace the movement will have no problems. I also think that it was interesting talking to all the experts and kind of saying that actually there was going to be new types of consultants that will emerge from this, that we're going to have the non-dev consultants, right? Or sorry, at the non-dev shops or the non-freelancers, in the just traditional consulting world, I think there will be literally specific positions for no coders to help automate those businesses. So instead of delivering your deliverable at a consulting of hey, this is what you should do, you'll actually have run experiments and have real metrics, because you'll be able to implement a bunch of that stuff with no code. So Wade, thinks, you can solve more types of problems and enables people to go faster. He's also saying it's kind of like a superpower. I think it enables a whole new set of knowledge work. And I think that's kind of what I was talking about with as it manifesting itself in the consulting world. It's there is actually a new type of knowledge that is no code. Okay, so finally, what does this mean for our personal lives? Utilizing no code tools and creating solutions for them, what Wade was just saying, it's actually going to become a basic skill. And I think then that means, and a lot of people were talking about it, it's going to move its way into education, and not just, maybe at university, maybe not just online. There's a whole open-ended question about how does education work in the future I don't want to kind of crack that open, but I do believe that, it will work its way into those more traditional education, that type of stuff as well. And then I think it also adds the opportunity for us to have our own personal, I guess you'd say, experiences shaped by it. I had the chance to get married this past month. I had an app for my wedding that was amazing, because everyone, we only were able to have our families there, but everyone back home was able to see all the pictures and everything, and kind of his own little social media-esque thing. And instead of outside of Facebook, was kind of in our own, personal app, which was amazing to see. So I think, and that's just one little thing, I think more and more of those types of things you're going to start seeing. But I think by far the biggest thing about this in society was that it's really going to level the playing field. There was a lot of talk about democratization of design and software creation, all possible because of this. Lacey had an amazing, quote, anyone can become problem solvers and they can start making a difference. And that to me is the biggest thing, that people have the power and the ability to impact positive change within both your community and within yourself. There's been so many amazing stories of people finding no code, whether that was Webflow and making a whole new career for themselves, or whether it was actually creating a product like Mile High Karate, where now his whole business is able to get still survive and thrive because of that, right? So whether you're becoming a freelancer and starting out and doing your own side hustle and making things for people, or whether you're jumping in there as a business owner and doing it yourself, I think that's all now really possible with no code. So we got some predictions. This was the way the calculations were done here, was like taking the expert's advice was like more factored in than the community responses for these predictions. But here's a bunch of fun predictions. I asked everybody the same set of, hey, when do you think this will actually happen? So in December 2021, everyone thinks that more products launched with no code than coding. So we will have surpassed, let's say, traditional coding in terms of like it launching on Product Hunt, those types of things. By September 2022, which I guess I was surprised with this one, but the no code will be as common to make as like making a slide deck. I mean, I really, really hope that one's true. But I do think that is like an interesting metric, and to everyone knows how to make a doc and a spreadsheet and a Google Slides or Keynote or whatever it is, PowerPoint presentation. So at what point will it become more like, oh, well, I'll just spin up an app to solve that simple thing instead of using a doc or a spreadsheet? Will kind of be an interesting thing. In December 2022, the prediction is that a product that has been built with no code reaches the mainstream status. And the way I said mainstream, and when I asked the question, was like a level of, let's say, like a Trello, that type of a thing, hasn't, not IPO, but is like, oh, that is like an app that everybody knows about. And that was built, this thing, it's built on no code, not one of the no code platforms. In March 2023, whatever the kind of power that low code has right now, the no code platforms will kind of be as powerful as that, was a little bit of the prediction. By December 2023, now all or a majority of dev shops will be using no code, as well as still obviously coding, adding on to those things, was the prediction. In June of 2025, we'll now actually start seeing a majority of schools and universities that are actually offering classes in no code. I cannot wait for that. That would be amazing. It wasn't all the way until June 2026 that somebody said the first no code, first product built with no code. Again, not saying the first no code platform, but the first product built with a no-code platform will IPO. And then finally, the latest one was, the one that was farthest out, was that some sort of major politician will really start talking about the importance of no-code. And that was just any politician in anything. It wasn't necessarily saying the exact leader of today. So those were kind of all the predictions, which was super fun to do. There's only a couple more things to talk about. And that's, so if this is really going to be the world that we're creating that I just kind of described, there's two things. There's like, what are no code platforms going to have to do in order to like meet these things and actually live up to these promises? And then the last one is like, what can you do to help make this successful, right? Because it's going to take both the no code platforms working extremely hard to make that possible, as well as the community. So first is that I think no code platforms need to be able to work for any idea that you have, whether that is big or small. And I mean that like you have a seed of an idea and it's really small and it starts on one of the platforms and maybe it just stays there. And like, it's just that small thing, maybe it's a personal thing, or maybe just some of your family is using it. That should work. That should be great. But it should also be taken all the way up to the extreme of like, wait a second, more people, like my friends want to be on that, and my friends and my friends want to be on that. And now people that I don't even know want to be on that, and scaling forever. So I think they've got to deliver on that platform or that promise. Next is they've all got to keep integrating together and working. We're already starting to see it's more and more complicated, but the more and more that they can work together, the more and more powerful that, and more possibilities. I think that's what caused a bunch of the explosion to happen in the growth of no code. So I think that needs to keep happening. The next is really focusing on, like I was saying, is this a new basic skill? If no code is a new basic skill, there needs to be a new set of like educational content for that. And I think it's been amazing to see a bunch of the no code communities start to do that. Whole platforms built around that. So I guess when I say what do no code platforms mean, I mean, it could also just be continuing to work with them, but definitely focusing on, it's made possible with no code, these things, but it's still is like a skill that anybody, can practice and get better at. So how can we continue to foster that happening? And I think another thing that kind of dovetails off of that is the ability for these platforms to work for less and less technically experienced people. I still think, if you were in, let's say, UX design, or you were a more technically minded person, it's still easier today to pick up those things, or you can make more and more powerful things on no code. I think for just to take it to the extreme, like I haven't had my grandma try to use Adalo, right? But I think aspirationally, like, we should keep trying to bump up like those less technically minded people, or less technically experienced people, and it should be really as easy to use as let's say a Google Doc or a spreadsheet or something like that. Okay, next, this is an important one. We've had a lot of internal talks at Adalo about this recently, and I know there was the whole documentary on Netflix about this as well. But I do think that building a strong ethical principles into these platforms really is going to be an extremely important part, and something that, we're starting to think about and wanting to build a strong foundation around right now. Think about right now, 0.3% of people can make software. We're about to unleash the ability for so many more people to. So I think figuring out how we can get that right from the beginning, so that things can only be created, or maybe it's guided to be created in more ethical ways, I think will be really important. And then finally, they've really got to work well with developers, and kind of, we really need to rethink this whole design dev handoff process. Okay, the last thing, what can you do? So share what you create. That's cannot be more important. I know it's scary to do that, but the more you can do that at any level, at any kind of part of your journey, the better. Keep pushing the limits, right? The more you push it and say like, well, it wasn't quite possible. Can you do this at all? And then we got to make it work, right? I think this is maybe a little bit off of sharing, but also like educating others, right? Not just keeping your information siloed in. Make templates, do one-on-one coaching, participating in forums and conversation, answering questions each other. It's really hard for a bunch of the no-code platforms right now to get to all the help that needs to be quite possible with the amount of interest and explosion and growth that we're all seeing. So anything that you all can do to grow and help us out will be amazing. Give feedback to the other creators when they share things, or ask to give them feedback on things. Because again, it's a new skill that we're all learning right now. And then finally, just spread the news everywhere to everyone. So yeah, those are the biggest things I think you all can do as well. Thank you so much for attending. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm trying to be a lot more active on their personal goal to talk a lot more about design and dev stuff. I know sometimes I'm afraid to share things of my own rights. I'm trying to share more and more, like I'm encouraging you all to share more and more today. So if you want to follow me, that would be great as well. All right. I think that's everything.
David, thank you so much. That was a wonderful chat. It was really great to hear from you. I know you've been going on for a while with the panel before that, so get up, grab some water before our conclusion for sure.
Awesome.
Just one quick question here. Design and UX, of course, is super important for all applications. We don't think the Craigslist type user experience and user design is going to cut it for much longer. So one of the questions that came for someone in the chat, if you're a non-expert in the field, how should you hire outside? How soon should you hire outside? And what should you be looking for in outside developers and outside designers?
Yeah, let's see. So I think when you first start, and that the Craigslist type of thing can work. I mean, I'm not trying to say, I definitely agree that's not how it will work forever. And I mean, I think I care the most about design, right? But I do think that if you just start by trying to create whatever you're creating to work for, let's say 5 to 10 people, and you're working really closely with them, then that can be fine. I think actually maybe previously before no code, I would have recommended doing design or hiring out that work even earlier, because it costs so much, right? If it was going to cost you, let's say, for example, 40 grand to make your app, then oh my goodness, you better make sure that the design of that thing is good, or else you're not really gonna be able to change it. But one of the amazing blessings with no code is that like it's easy to change that. If it's not good, you can still have a functioning thing, but swap things in and out. So I would say actually like in terms of hiring out there, I would try to do it yourself. I mean, there's a level of like, well, I just couldn't quite make no code happen. And there's definitely a level of like, you have to understand to some extent how apps work. So if you're struggling there, then go find someone to make a small version of it for sure. Especially if you don't have the time to do it, if you're a business owner, things like that. If you do have the time and passion, I would say try to do it and see where it takes you.
Sure. Yeah. Great answer, David. Thank you so much for all your time on the panel and your talk as well. Best of luck with you at Adalo. I hope we continue to see the growth there that we've seen in the past. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.